Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our discussion program. Today, we are exploring a very important question in education. Should traditional letter grades be discontinued? Many people have strong opinions about this, and it affects students, teachers, and parents. We have two guests with us today to share their views. First, we have David, an educator who believes that letter grades are not helpful for learning and should be removed. And with us is Emily, a parent and academic who thinks letter grades are essential for our education system. David and Emily will each make an opening statement to explain their positions. After that, they will have a chance to respond to each other's points. Then, I will ask them a few questions, and finally, they will give their closing statements. We hope this discussion will give you a lot to think about. So, let's begin.
Good afternoon, Sarah, and everyone listening. Thank you for having me. I am here today to talk about why I believe we should stop using traditional letter grades like A, B, C, D, and F in our schools. I think these grades are an old way of thinking, and they actually cause more problems than they solve for our students. My first main point is about student well-being. Grades create a lot of stress and anxiety for students. Think about it. Many students feel sick before a big test, or they can't sleep because they are worried about what grade they will get. This constant pressure is not good for their mental health, and it's certainly not good for learning. When students are too stressed, their brains don't work as well, and they can't focus on understanding new things. My second point is that grades make students focus on the wrong thing. They start to care more about getting a good mark than about actually learning. For example, some students might choose easier tasks or subjects where they know they can get an A, even if they are not very interested in them. Or, they might study hard just to remember information for a test, and then forget everything a week later. This is not real learning. Real learning means understanding ideas, being curious, and wanting to know more. Grades often stop this natural curiosity because the focus is only on the final letter or number. So what can we do instead? I believe we should focus more on giving students detailed feedback about their work. Teachers can tell students what they did well, where they can improve, and how to improve. This kind of feedback helps students understand their progress and motivates them to learn and grow without the fear of a bad grade. We can also track individual student progress over time, celebrating their improvements and efforts, not just comparing them to others with a single letter. Let's try to create schools where students love to learn and explore new ideas, not just work for a letter on a report card. Our goal should be to help them become lifelong learners.
Good afternoon, Sarah and David. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss this important topic. I understand David's concerns, but I have a different view. I believe traditional letter grades are very important and should not be discontinued. Grades are a familiar system, and they provide a clear and simple way to understand how a student is performing academically. My first main argument is that grades give students a clear idea of how they are doing, and this motivates them to work harder. When a student receives an A, they feel proud of their hard work, and it encourages them to continue doing well. If a student gets a C or a D, they understand that they need to put in more effort or seek help in that subject. This feedback is direct and easy to understand for students, parents, and teachers alike. Without this clear benchmark, it can be difficult for students to know where they stand and what they need to improve. My second main argument is that grades are a simple and fair way to check student performance. They are also necessary for important next steps in life, like university applications or job opportunities. Universities use grades to select students from thousands of applicants because it's a standardized measure, more or less. Employers often look at academic records to see if a candidate has the necessary knowledge and discipline for a job. If we remove grades, how will these institutions make fair comparisons? It could become very complicated and subjective. David mentioned alternatives like detailed feedback. While feedback is certainly important, I question how practical it is, as the asterisk-only form of assessment for large numbers of students. Imagine a teacher with 150 students. Writing detailed, personalized reports for each one, for every subject, regularly, would be an enormous task. Grades offer a more efficient way to communicate overall performance, which can then be supported by more detailed feedback. They are not perfect, but they are a useful tool that helps students, teachers, and parents understand academic progress and plan for the future. Discontinuing them could lead to more confusion and less motivation for many students.
Thank you, Emily, for your points. You mentioned that grades motivate students. However, I think they often motivate students in the wrong way. They motivate students to chase the grade, not necessarily to understand the material deeply. This is what we call extrinsic motivation, doing something for an external reward, like an A. What we really want to encourage is intrinsic motivation, where students learn because they are interested and curious. Real motivation comes from a love of learning, from wanting to solve problems, or from understanding the world better, not from the fear of getting a bad grade. Detailed feedback, as I mentioned, can actually be much more motivating because it shows students exactly what they need to do to improve their skills and understanding. It helps them see their own progress, which is a powerful motivator. Emily also mentioned that grades are fair and needed for university and job applications. I disagree that grades are always fair. Different schools have different standards, and even different teachers in the same school can grade differently. So an A from one school might not mean the same as an A from another. This isn't truly fair or standardized. Furthermore, grades don't show the whole student. They don't tell us about a student's creativity, their ability to work in a team, their problem-solving skills, or their resilience. These are all very important qualities for success in higher education and in life. For applications, we could use portfolios of student work, which show actual skills and projects. Detailed teacher reports that describe a student's strengths, progress, and learning styles, or even interviews, could provide a much richer picture than a simple letter grade. My main concern remains the negative impact of grades on how students feel about learning and on their overall well-being. Education should be an exciting journey, not a stressful race for marks.
David, you're very concerned about student stress, and I do understand that. No one wants students to be overwhelmed by anxiety. However, I believe that learning to deal with some pressure can actually be good for students. Life itself has pressures and deadlines, and future jobs will certainly have expectations and evaluations. A bit of pressure from grades can help students develop resilience, time management skills, and a good work ethic, which are important for their future. The problem isn't grades themselves, but perhaps too much emphasis on high-stakes exams or an unsupportive learning environment. We can find ways to reduce unnecessary stress without removing grades completely. For example, by having more supportive teaching methods and fewer exams that decide everything. You also suggested that students focus only on marks, not on learning, because of grades. I think good teachers can help students focus on learning while still using grades as one tool for assessment. Grades don't have to be the only thing that matters. They are just one part of the larger education process. Teachers can combine grades with meaningful feedback, class discussions, and projects that encourage deep understanding. The goal is to use grades as a guide, not as the final word on a student's ability or potential. My main concern is that if we remove grades, it becomes very difficult to measure student progress clearly and consistently. How will we know if students are meeting the expected standards? How will we prepare them for the competitive nature of higher education and the job market if they have no experience with this kind of evaluation? Clear benchmarks are important for both students and the education system.
Thank you both for those rebuttals. David, Emily talked about the practical need for grades for things like university entry. If we remove grades, how can we make sure the system is fair and clear for everyone, especially when students move between different schools or apply for higher education?
That's a very important question, Sarah. For fairness and clarity in university admissions without letter grades, we could develop more comprehensive systems. One option is to use standardized descriptive reports from schools. These reports would detail a student's skills, their approach to learning, and their progress in different areas, using a common framework. Student portfolios, which I mentioned earlier, can also play a big role. These could showcase a student's best work, projects, and achievements, giving a direct look at their abilities. We could also implement common assessment tasks across regions or nationally. These tasks wouldn't be graded with letters, but would be designed to show specific skills and understandings. This way, universities get richer information than just a GPA, and it can be more equitable because it's less about where you went to school and more about what you can actually do.
Thank you, David. Now, Emily, David is concerned that grades don't show the whole picture of a student. Things like creativity, critical thinking, or teamwork. Do you think grades can sometimes give a limited or even perhaps a misleading idea of a student's true abilities and potential?
That's a fair point, Sarah. I agree that grades, like any single measure, might not capture every aspect of a student's abilities perfectly. Things like creativity or teamwork are complex skills that are indeed harder to measure with a simple letter grade. Grades primarily focus on academic knowledge and application in a specific subject. However, I believe grades are still the most efficient and widely understood measure of academic performance that we currently have. They provide a common language for everyone. Instead of discarding them, we can supplement grades with other forms of assessment. For example, schools can include comments on report cards about these other skills. Project-based assessments, presentations, and teacher observations can all contribute to a more holistic view of the student, working alongside grades, not necessarily replacing them entirely.
In closing, I want to briefly summarize my main concerns about traditional letter grades. They often cause unnecessary stress and anxiety, which gets in the way of genuine learning. They can also push students to focus on achieving a certain mark, rather than truly understanding and engaging with the material. Furthermore, a single letter grade simply cannot capture the full range of a student's abilities, talents, or their potential for growth. If we move away from this outdated system, we can create a more positive and effective learning environment for everyone. Imagine schools where there is more joy in learning, where students are encouraged to be curious, to ask questions, and to explore their interests, without the constant pressure of grades. A focus on detailed, constructive feedback can help students understand their unique strengths and areas for development, fostering a mindset of growth and continuous improvement. This approach can lead to better student well-being and a deeper, more meaningful engagement with education. Let's choose a path that values learning over labels and curiosity over competition. Let's build an education system that truly nurtures every child's potential.
To conclude, I want to restate why I believe traditional letter grades remain important in our education system. Grades provide clear, understandable feedback to students about their academic performance, which can be a strong motivator for them to strive for improvement and achieve their best. They offer a standardized way to assess learning, which is essential not only for students and parents to understand progress, but also for institutions like universities and for future employers. While I acknowledge David's points about potential stress, removing grades entirely presents significant practical challenges. We might face a lack of clarity in assessing student achievement, difficulties in comparing students fairly for opportunities, and even a potential for lower academic standards if clear benchmarks are removed. The alternatives, while well-intentioned, may not be as efficient or as universally understood as the grading system we currently have, especially in large, diverse educational settings. Letter grades, while not a perfect system, are a vital and effective tool. They help students to aim for excellence, prepare them for future challenges, and provide a common reference point for academic achievement.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you, Emily, for a very thoughtful and interesting discussion today. We've heard strong arguments from both sides. David has emphasized the potential harms of grades on student well-being and true learning. suggesting a shift towards feedback and holistic assessment. Emily has highlighted the role of grades in providing motivation, clear assessment, and their necessity for future pathways. There are clearly many factors to consider when we talk about the future of assessment in education. We encourage our audience to think more about this important topic and discuss it further. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us.